people who know me, I don't get too excited about anything. And I don't endorse anything I don't use or believe in. I use tri-metal, and I believe in tri-metal.
I'm telling you, this club's for real. This is the direction golf is headed. And it's so hot the golf pros can't even keep it in stock. Oversized is over. The tri-metal is the right size club.
Call now to receive your free video on the tri-metal. We'll also rush you a free subscription to Great Golf Magazine, the insider's guide to new technology and in-depth interviews from the world of golf. Call the number on your screen now for your complimentary subscription and free video.
How can you plan your day when you don't know what the weather's going to be like? I know people like to plan ahead for their day. I can help you out.
Right now, it's your local forecast on the Weather Channel.
This edition of Storm Watch is sponsored by the Home Depot. Of course, a part of Storm Watch is the tropical update. We have for you the latest information on Hurricane George here, just south of Florida, moving across the lower Keys as we speak. And we have a couple of other hurricanes, actually. We have Hurricane Ivan, Hurricane Jeanne here, and Tropical Storm Karl, as all three systems churn out across the open waters of the Atlantic. We'll talk more about these systems in a moment, but first let's get the latest on George. This is as of the 8 o'clock advisory from the National Hurricane Center. Winds up to 100 miles an hour. It is moving west-northwest at 14, centered 24 degrees north, 81.2 degrees west, and that puts it approximately 50 miles southeast of Key West, Florida, the southernmost island of the Keys here. And there you see our hurricane symbol. Now it's expected to continue moving on its west-northwestern course, and that will put it in the eastern Gulf of Mexico in the next 24 hours. Hurricane warnings remain in effect for the northwestern Bahama Islands. Also a hurricane watch for the southern peninsula of Florida from Deerfield Beach along the southeast coast all the way to the west central coast, Longboat Key, Florida, and a hurricane watch for the western tip of Cuba. Now, we never had any watches or warnings out for Jamaica. As you know, the path of George went across the U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, and then Cuba, and now it's moving right here across the lower Keys this morning of Florida. So this system definitely has a legacy, as we've had reports of just devastation as it moved across the northeastern Leeward Islands. Our latest satellite picture shows still broad clouds, heavy rain associated with this system. We've had some feeder bands coming in the southeast coast of Florida with possible tornadoes here. So it's dangerous this morning as George continues to move west. Again, eventually moving into the eastern Gulf of Mexico. The bigger picture shows our other systems, so let's get the latest on these. Starting with Tropical Storm Karl with winds of 65 miles an hour. It's moving southeast, so it's moving away from the lower 48. Hurricane Ivan, winds of 80 miles an hour. It's moving northeast, so it too is moving away from the lower 48. And Hurricane Jeanne is now moving west-northwest with 105-mile-an-hour winds. It's a long ways away, but it too is expected to recurve back to the east.
Hurricane George closes in on the Florida Keys. Live coverage from South Florida and weather from around the nation coming up on Weather Center after your local forecast.
This program was sponsored by the Home Depot.
As a customer, you're so important to us that you should have the best price all the time rather than just sometimes when other stores think it's convenient for you.
Home Depot doesn't have sales because we have an everyday low price.
The competitors have to have the sales because they jack their prices up so high, but we keep our prices low every day.
You would be out of your mind if you shop someplace else.
Tropical storm force winds continue here in Key Biscayne. Will they get any stronger, and what's the effect on Miami? We will let you know. Stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Bill Keneally. We're here in Naples, Florida. The winds are increasing. The rain is starting to pelt us. We'll have a full report coming up on Weather Center next.
And I'm Bruce Edwards of the Weather Channel Forecast Center as we continue to chart the progress of dangerous Hurricane George moving through the Florida Straits and beginning his assault on South Florida. There's a look at the radar showing up over South Florida and the Keys, and some significant storminess is approaching the Florida Keys as we speak. Other squally weather through the upper Keys in southern Florida near Homestead. We've had reports of potential tornadoes farther north along the coast around Martin and St. Lucie County, as well as flash flood warnings out for both Martin and St. Lucie counties until 10 o'clock this morning due to very heavy rains. I'm joined by Dr. Steve Lyons, the Weather Channel hurricane expert. And Dr. Lyons, again, this is a dangerous hurricane, and just now are we starting to see the really worst of the weather approach the Keys?
That's right. It's really coming in on the northeast and east side of the circulation. You can see here in the radar, the circulation center is roughly in here. The Keys are over here. And they really haven't had much in the way of rain or real strong winds there yet, but they're going to soon. All the strong winds and rain are in this band here and farther out in this area. And we just got an aircraft reconnaissance report. Pressure's down to 982 millibars. It's dropped a few more millibars, so it is intensifying.
Alrighty, we have both coasts covered in the state of Florida because of Hurricane George. On the west coast, it is Bill Keneally, and on the east coast, in Key Biscayne, Florida, Jim Cantori is situated. We'll start, first of all, ahead of the storm with Bill Keneally in Naples, Florida. And Bill, you mentioned earlier it's starting to get a little blusterier in Naples this morning.
That is right, Bruce. I think we're living on borrowed time if we want dry weather. The rain is starting to pelt us, but it's getting a lot worse farther on to the south. So let's take a look as we'll pan down the beach here. We're looking southward down towards South Naples, and then you cannot see it, but all the way down to the horizon line would be around the Marco Island area. Very heavy rain falling down there, quite a veil of dark purple. So far this morning, that rain has been skirting us here in Naples itself, but it looks like that rain is starting to move in off of the mainland areas off to our east. So it looks like rain is ahead, and with that rain there will be some squalls with locally some tropical storm force winds. Hopefully we can keep any hurricane force winds to our south for the bulk of the daytime. High tide, by the way, coming in around 3 o'clock this afternoon. I think the critical high tide there will be about 4 o'clock tomorrow morning when the wind does go around to the southwest. Now let's get a perspective on what's happening on the northeastern side of the hurricane. And with that, we'll turn it over to Jim Cantori. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Bill. One of the worst aspects of the weather was actually last night when those first two bands came in. There were a couple of isolated tornadoes around Cutler Ridge and also into North Miami Beach. But I want to show you what's happening now as we take you across Biscayne Bay and on over to the city. You can see how they're doing over there, and the ceiling's actually quite high. We haven't had rain in a while, and I've actually donned the rain jacket. But we still have a pretty good east-northeast wind here, and you can see a sailboat out there which is kind of leaning over just a little bit, but it's pretty much anchored down pretty well, Bruce, and they're doing very well, as a matter of fact. Miami International not closed, but there are not going to be any flights in and out of Miami. Let me show you our mass cam shot, and we'll show you the bridge, which goes from the Key across to the mainland, and it's very, very quiet there. Not a lot of traffic out there today as Miami is virtually shut down as a result of this hurricane. But hopefully we won't fare much worse than this, but as that storm intensifies, surely the winds could pick up even this far north. And the big concern, Bruce, for here is the flooding, and that's why they're still encouraging folks in the mobile home parks to seek shelters, which they've just opened more of because people have been flooding in there this morning. Back to you.
All righty, thank you. Jim Cantori live from Key Biscayne, and before that, Bill Keneally live from Naples, Florida. Now situated in Marathon Key in the Florida Keys, we have with us on the telephone Billy Wagner, the Director of Emergency Management for the Florida Keys. Billy, good morning. How are conditions now there in your location?
Well, good morning. We have sustained tropical storm winds right now between 45 and 50, and the highest gust we've had in the last hour has been up to 76. We have a lot of trees down and wires down in the middle Keys, and we have some extensive coastal flooding from the Tavernier area, which is up at mile marker 90 all the way into Key West. So about 90% of the lower Keys are getting extensive flooding on the ocean side.
Billy, we had a report that about half the residents of the Keys evacuated the other day. Does that concern you at the present time? Did you anticipate perhaps a larger response?
We probably have about 30,000 people throughout the Keys. The majority of them in the lower Keys where they're going to get the greatest impact. Hopefully we were able to get everybody out of the real high risk areas where the storm surged, and I hope nobody's in any mobile homes or RVs up there in that lower Key, or throughout the Keys, in fact, because we are going to experience hurricane conditions throughout that area.
Any reports of any problems so far, Billy?
No, we haven't had any major problems right now, but we're just starting to get the brunt of the system, and we certainly anticipate getting hit harder than we are right now.
Okay, thank you very much. Billy Wagner, Emergency Management Director for the Florida Keys, reporting this morning. Joined again by Dr. Steve Lyons. Doctor, getting the satellite picture of the hurricane. Just got the 9 o'clock advisory out from the Hurricane Center. And there is somewhat good news for the eastern portions of Florida in that we have dropped some of the warnings.
That's right. Basically, I believe it's from Florida City on up the coast here. They become tropical storm warnings. The hurricane warnings have been dropped, and they've been replaced by tropical storm warnings.
Yeah, here are the latest conditions from the Hurricane Center. The center of George was 24.2 north, 81.5 west, or about 30 miles south-southeast of Key West. It is continuing to move northwest at 14 miles an hour, is expected to maintain that course. Now, even though it's 30 miles south-southwest of Key West, the hurricane-force winds are reportedly extending out 45 miles, mainly to the east of the center. So again, hurricane-like conditions will be felt in the Keys very, very shortly. The maximum sustained winds are still at 100 miles per hour and is expected to continue to work its way and maintain that strength, and perhaps increase in strength a little bit later on today as it continues out over the Gulf waters. Let's take a look at some of those warnings again we see across the Bahamas and the tropical and the hurricane watches in western Cuba. But let's go to the Florida map. Now again, this is the change right here. Florida City, which is approximately right here, that is the point that we're concerned with now. Florida City, right in this area, if you can pardon me. From there north is where tropical storm warning's out. That means from Deerfield, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, the hurricane warning has been lowered. So again, tropical storm warning is in effect there, but again, not a hurricane warning for that. Marathon, Florida, along the chain of the Florida Keys, is beginning to feel the wrath of Hurricane George. The area is getting hammered by blustery winds and some rain, but winds by far and away are the story now, more so than the rain. Boats tied down 2 or 3 times are still getting banged around at the docks. Winds measuring 45, gusting as high as 76 miles an hour have been reported there at Marathon Key. And of course, low-level flooding is occurring, and it's going to get a little worse before it gets better. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us here at the Weather Channel. I'm Bruce Edwards in the Forecast Center for this special edition of Weather Center AM, sponsored by Lowe's Home Improvement Warehouse. We're continuing to monitor the progress of George, and Dr. Steve Lyons, our hurricane expert, joins us. And we've been watching George, and we're seeing now some of the first visible satellite pictures. And again, it still remains a very impressive storm.
It does, and it's starting to look even better. You can see here on the visible imagery, this area right here is the eye. You can see the Florida Keys right in here, Miami, the greater Miami area up in here. And the eye wall has formed a very nice, I should say, very deep area of thunderstorm activity that's going to move into the central Keys area as the eye of the hurricane moves across, basically across Key West or very close to it in the next couple of hours.
And of course, the main surge of energy is usually coming up from this east and northeast quadrant, and that's encompassing just about the entire chain of the Florida Keys.
That's right, and although we would like to have the footage down there, we have our live crews up in here where it's safer. Down here it's completely unsafe because of that storm surge.
That indeed is the case as we continue to stay ahead of the storm. We have two crews on location in South Florida. Bill Keneally is located in Naples, Florida, where conditions will likely deteriorate as the day progresses. And Jim Cantori, who's seen the good, the bad, and the ugly from this weather in Key Biscayne. Good morning, Jim. How are conditions now in Key Biscayne, Florida?
Well, of course, good news, Bruce, here. We have tropical storm warnings now as opposed to hurricane warnings, and that's getting a lot of folks resting a lot easier. You can see here the basic scene that we have around Biscayne Bay. A lot of the boats anchored down for the storm and riding it out with just a little tilt. Unfortunately, we'll show you some shots that we just shot about 30 minutes ago across the William Powell Bridge of this particular boat. It's about a 40-footer that got trapped underneath the bridge and basically floated between these two roads on the bridge. So it's kind of stuck down in there, and what they're trying to do is basically anchor it down for one and use a couple of ropes to pull it on out. Now you'll see the owner of the boat. This is the young man who's going to basically get on the one rope that's already established and pull another one over to the shoreline. And what he's trying to do is get another rope so that they can use that and pull the boat out eventually. Now what we're going to show you now is the mast cam, and this mast cam is showing us across the Bay Bridge, and it's on the other side of that bridge, on the left side, which is where we have got the boat trapped. So that has been the biggest problem that we've heard of so far, Bruce. Sporadic power outages, Dade and Broward counties. Miami International is not closed, but there's no flights in and out, so it might as well be closed, and they have not released information as to when they're going to do that. And any of the power outages that we have had have been handled very well. The workers have been able to get out because of these breaks between the squalls. But again, folks resting a lot easier now as a result of the hurricane warnings being dropped. Let's go ahead and find out what's happening on the West Coast as some of the worst weather that was here this morning may have moved on over. We'll get a live report from Bill Keneally. Bill?
All right, Jim, thanks a lot. I think that's right. We termed the weather very changeable over here right now. Earlier we had the bad weather pointed to our south. Now it looks like it's angling away to our north and west. We're going to take on a little trip here via the camera, and we'll head up that way. We'll look northwest, heading up the beach towards the Bonita Beach area. See, the sky is very dark now. That is the shower that blew through here. No thunder, no lightning, a very typical tropical squall, dumping a little rain in short order. But now things have settled down here in and around the areas by the Naples Beach Hotel. As my cameraman Dave pans south, you can see there is some brightening sky as you get down there towards the Marco Island area, where we had seen very threatening weather over much of the morning hours. However, the radar looks rather nasty off to our south and east, and that is going to be the direction of the rough weather today. Do remember there is a tornado watch in the area, squally type of weather with increasing wind and heavy rainfall in an area that has very saturated soil now, so it's going to be a difficult situation for traveling next high tide in the area about 3 o'clock this afternoon. Now for our Spanish-speaking viewers, we have from the Weather Channel Latin America, Mari Ramos with a report from Key Biscayne. Mari?
Thank you, Bill. Continuamos con este reportaje especial para nuestros televidentes de habla hispana. Estamos aquí en la bahía de Key Biscayne, en la isla de Key Biscayne, en el sur de la Florida. Y el problema principal para la zona metropolitana de Miami, por ejemplo, ha sido el viento. Pueden ver a mi alrededor, el viento continúa soplando fuertemente a través de toda esta zona. Continúa siendo peligroso, por supuesto, para la navegación, pero también para los automovilistas. Es recomendable que se mantengan en sus casas y procuren no salir a menos que sea verdaderamente necesario para evitar los accidentes automovilísticos. El problema principal, por supuesto, está en la zona sur de la Florida, para ustedes que nos están viendo desde Los Cayos. Allí el ojo del huracán continúa acercándose cada vez más. This is all for now for our Spanish-speaking viewers. Let's go back to Bruce.
Thank you, Mari. Muchas gracias. And Jim Cantori, both in Key Biscayne, Florida, and Bill Keneally live in Naples, Florida. Let's look at the latest position from the National Hurricane Center on the center of George, located at 24.2 north, 81.5 west, or about 30 miles south-southeast of Key West, Florida. Again, it has grown through the early morning hours. Top sustained winds 100 miles an hour. Expected to maintain that strength, if not increase in strength, a little later on today. It has been unerring in its path west-northwest at about 14. So again, that will mean that within probably the next 2 hours, again, the center will be passing quite near Key West, Florida. Central pressure continued to fall over the last observation, down to 982 millibars. Now, as Jim had mentioned in his report earlier, there's a bit of good news over southeast Florida that the hurricane warnings have been dropped from Deerfield Beach south to Florida City. They still remain in effect from Florida City around through the Keys up to Longboat Key. Still hurricane warnings in effect here, but from Florida City to Stewart now we have tropical storm warnings in effect, not hurricane warnings. And from Longboat Key up to Bayport, still the tropical storm warnings remain in effect. And likely as the day wears on and as the hurricane moves out into the Gulf of Mexico, we'll see the warnings over the East Coast generally dropped or at least downgraded, but they will be increasing more than likely over western Florida and parts of the Florida Panhandle later today. Now, the Severe Storms Prediction Center has issued a tornado watch for South Florida, as is customary with the landfalling tropical storms or hurricanes. And information from the Storms Prediction Center is that because of the increased activity over the northern fringes of that boxed area, they're likely to be replaced, that box, within the hour by a new watch, tornado watch, that'll extend up northwestward, include much of central Florida, and that's where we've seen the severe weather thus far this morning. Now, flash flood watches posted for all of Florida. A flash flood warning just expired for Martin County, but again, the threat for severe weather exists. Again, Dr. Steve Lyons, we welcome you back into the situation. We've been watching the wind gusts, of course, now just finally feeling some hurricane force gust on the Keys.
That's right. Finally getting to hurricane force, and the strongest winds are going to be after the eye passes. You can see here's the
Hurricane George is battering the Florida Keys at this hour. The waves are high and so are the winds. It's making a very scary situation for those who dared to ignore evacuation orders. Doppler radar shows that the strength of what the hurricane has to offer to parts of South Florida and sections of the Gulf is racking into the lower and middle Keys even as we speak. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this special edition of Weather Center AM. I'm Bruce Edwards in the Forecast Center. We'll have a complete update on Hurricane George, which is now hammering the Florida Keys this morning. I'm joined by our hurricane expert, Dr. Steve Lyons. And Dr. Lyons, as we look at the Doppler radar, we're seeing now those heavy bands really slamming into the coast.
We sure are, and you can see that we're getting wind gusts upwards of 100 miles per hour now, or very close to that. In the Central Keys, and this band here moving just north of Key West a few miles, maybe 20 or 30 miles. Very, very strong winds there.
And we've had reports of winds gusting to 94 miles an hour at Key West, according to amateur radio operators just a few moments ago. We've got a still satellite picture to show us that shows us, again, the very distinct strength of this particular hurricane.
That's right. You can see there were very strong thunderstorms a few hours ago, and they produced some gravity waves. These are pulsations that move out away from it, and this is a typical signature we see with a hurricane that's developing fairly quickly, and that's what we've seen, and we'll see that just in just a minute with our new advisory information, that it has developed and strengthened slightly.
That's indeed the case. We look at the velocities, as we call them. Explain to our viewers now what it is we're looking at with this particular graphic.
Okay, well, put yourself in Key West. This is the radar site here, and it measures how fast the wind is coming toward the radar in blue and how fast it's going away from the radar in red. And the scale is over here, and you can see that as it comes in and goes out, it's basically peaking out at 64 miles per hour or higher on each side. Of course, it's much higher than that. We have a single estimate there that's 123 knots at above the surface. Of course, that may be only an instantaneous measurement, but the thing to note here also is that very, very close to the ground is where the maximum winds are occurring. So those and thunderstorms will come right down to the ground. So they're in it right now, big time.
Alrighty. We have two crews that are positioned along the Florida southern coast, both east and west, out of harm's way, but ahead of the storm to give us the latest information. Bill Keneally is situated in Naples, Florida on the west coast, and on the east coast, Jim Cantori in Key Biscayne, Florida. Jim, the situation has improved as far as the warnings are concerned. They've been downgraded to tropical storm warnings in Key Biscayne, but it still looks a little blustery there this morning.
Yeah, it does, Bruce. From where I am right now, we are just north of the rain bands. As a matter of fact, let's go ahead and take our storm cam shot. I'll take this right now, and you can see off to our south and west that we do have some pretty dark clouds and ominous clouds down that way. That's looking across the William Powell Bridge, by the way, and you can see how much darker it is down there, and that is where the heavy rain is. You can also see how the wind is blowing some of the palms around as well. It's still very windy. I mean, winds are still at 25, 30 miles an hour, but obviously a far cry from what they're getting down in the Keys. What's happening here on the bay? Well, you can see behind me here kind of a light to moderate chop. There's a boat that's anchored down there that has done very well, and most of the boats anchored in the Bay Area here have pretty much made it on through. And as we pan down toward the city, you can see that this city's skyline is seeing visible very, very well as the ceilings have lifted, and we've even had a little bit of blue sky, believe it or not, Bruce. So all in all, things have been very, very well here. We've had several policemen come by and give us their reports of the situation, and they couldn't ask for a more perfect scenario here, and even some homeowners were very, very pleased with the way things have turned out. But of course, we're not out of the woods yet. We could still get some rain bands, and the city is pretty much shut down, so you can't go out and run to the grocery store. But other than that, folks are ready for this to move on through so they can get their lives back into order. Other than that, it's still going to be a rough afternoon in the Keys, and to find out how it's going on the West Coast, let's talk to Bill Keneally in Naples. Bill?
All right, Jim, thanks a lot. Yesterday we thought we had a rather precarious perch over here in the Naples area here in southwestern Florida, but so far so good. We're feeling pretty lucky today, and we surely like what we see on the radar picture at this hour as Hurricane George continues to pull to the west-northwest. I think at its closest pass, it'll probably still be at least 100 miles to our south or southwest as the afternoon wears on. Let's pan a little bit, take you back down towards that direction, the general direction being southwest. And then as David pans all the way down the beach, we'll be looking all the way down towards the south-southwest. That is in the neighborhood of Marco Island, where we've had reports of some locally heavy rain periodically. But really, we have not had much in the way of wind. I'd say squally type of weather is more like it. The wind's gusting on occasion 30 to 35 miles per hour, possibly minimal tropical storm force at times in some of the heavier squalls. But so far, we're pretty good. The rain will be a factor. This area has very saturated soil from a lot of recent rainfall, so that will not be pleasant. And also the tide's a factor. Next high tide about 3 o'clock. With that east wind, I'd worry on the bay side, Naples Bay that is. Then as far as tomorrow morning's tides, 3 a.m. and 3 p.m. as our winds go around to the southwest and eventually west. That will be the critical time here on the Gulf side. So Bruce, so far so good. See if you can keep that rain and wind at bay. We'll be very appreciative. Tell you what though, we're going to take you now down to the Weather Channel Latin America. I want to get a report for the Spanish-speaking viewers. And for that report, let's go back to Key Biscayne and Mari Ramos. Mari?
Thanks a lot, Bill. Well, as you can see, we're going to talk now to the Spanish-speaking viewers. Y para ustedes que nos acompañan a través del Weather Channel, quiero contarles y mostrarles más bien cómo es que están las condiciones del tiempo aquí en la bahía de Key Biscayne. Fíjense toda la actividad de viento principalmente que se mantiene a lo largo de toda esta región. Ahí pueden ver también a mi alrededor el oleaje que se ha formado también en esta zona que usualmente es un poco más tranquila. Pueden ver ahí también la ciudad, la zona del centro de la ciudad de Miami. Desafortunadamente para las personas en Los Cayos la situación es mucho peor. El centro del huracán George se acerca cada vez más y está ocasionando fuertes vientos, huracán de categoría 2, las condiciones continúan bastante malas. Allí tienen que lidiar no solamente con los problemas del viento, sino que también con la lluvia y los problemas con la marejada ciclónica. Para aquellos de ustedes que conocen esa zona, saben que solamente hay una carretera para llegar y con agua a los dos lados, así que la situación se pone bien peligrosa. Mantengan la sintonía que los mantendremos bien informados. Let's go back to Bruce now in the studio.
Thank you very much for all those reports, reporting live from Key Biscayne as well as in Naples, Florida, ahead of the storm to keep you updated on the latest situation. Now, we've got the absolute latest from the National Hurricane Center, the new position report just released as of 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and some interesting changes. Now, George was centered at 24.3 north, 81.7 west, or 15 miles south of Key West, Florida. But of course, hurricane force winds are being felt upwards of 80 miles from the center. So again, hurricane force winds are battering the Keys right now. The maximum sustained winds have increased to 105 miles an hour. Slowly but surely, George continues to gain strength. It began once it moved off the coast of Cuba and has continued to slowly gain strength over the warm waters of the Florida Straits. It is movement during the last observation, and this one is more northwesterly now at 14 miles per hour.